Hi everyone. So I'm just going to go over the report really briefly just to make sure you've gotten all the parts together and that you're on track to turn it in, both for the peer review and for the final grade. And there's a couple small things I haven't gone over yet that I want to go over. So first, you do have to have front matter. It's described in the prompt, okay? And front matter just refers to anything that comes before the introduction. Okay, and back matter means anything after the conclusion. And that's true for any document. Anything that comes at the beginning or the end that's like extra, that's not part of the actual meat of the document, we call either front matter or back matter. Okay, so first of all, you do have to have a title page. And I want to talk to you for a second about the title. If you look on the rubric which I sent out, which explains everything that you're going to be graded on, one of the things it says you're going to be graded on is including a clear and limiting title. By limiting, we mean we're not going to get confused about what this is about. A really broad or vague title would be the opposite of a limiting title. So, for example, to keep using the same example I've been using, if you were doing a project on the food bank at FIU, you would not title the report "The Food Bank at FIU," okay? Because I cannot tell from that title what the report is actually about, and that seems to be like 100,000 different things it could be about the food bank, right? And so, what exactly did you look at? What is this report about in regards to the food bank? Okay, so a better title might be something like the effectiveness, um, a report studying the effectiveness of the shift changes at the food bank at FIU, right? And that is limiting because now I know that you've taken it from, out here to here in what it can be, right? It will have limited what I am going to interpret this as meaning, okay? And it has to be a clear and limiting title. The title should indicate in an obvious way, like everything else we've been writing for this project, for this class, everything we write, we say just tell the reader what they need to know right away. And the same thing is true for this. You tell them what they need to know right away in the title, even. Okay. Then your other front matter that you're expected to have for this report is a table of contents. Okay, and you do have a very short report, but you still do need to tell the reader what page the introduction starts on, which would be page 1, and then what page the method starts on, what page the result starts on. And everybody's seen table of contents before, but I feel like I have to say, because sometimes students don't do this, just like every table of contents you've ever seen, there's usually like dot, 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 connecting the number on the one side of the page with the words on the other side of the page. And you do need something like that that helps the reader visually follow what page it's on, okay? So you do have to put something, which usually is just like a lot of periods between the word and the number. And the other thing is the words should perfectly line up, and the numbers, the first digit of the numbers should, well, in this case, you'll only have one digit. But if your pages went up to like page 10 or page 100, the first digit has to perfectly line up too. Okay? So make sure that you formatted that correctly. And then you have the report. You have the introduction where you explain to me, what you studied, why it was worth studying, what I need to understand about this thing that you studied before I understand whether it's working or not. Then you have the methods where you explain to me, what you did, why you did it that way, how many people did you survey, how did you distribute the survey. And importantly, I want to point out here that you do want to say at some point, please remember to say at some point in the method section that a copy of the survey is in the appendix, okay? A copy of the survey is in the appendix. That indicates to the reader that they should look to the appendix if they want to see the exact survey that you turned out, okay? And then you have your results where you talk about what people said, what you found, and summarizing for the reader your greatest findings, using images to help them understand the hardest ones to understand, or using images to draw their attention to the most important things that you found. And again, I want to remind you that I did send out an example document in the last announcement that shows you a couple of results sections so you can see how the figure has to be named and captioned, right? So you have to say figure 1 and then a caption. And that's separate from if the figure has a title, which sometimes, like for example, if you ask people, have you ever heard of FIU's food bank? The image graphic might say, have you ever heard of FIU's food bank at the top? But that is not the caption, okay? The caption would be a graph showing blah, blah, blah. Okay, remember the caption tells the reader what was there if the image doesn't come through. Okay, and then in the paragraph, you have to still give all of that information as if the graph is not there. And then you have a few different options. You can say at the beginning of the sentence, as seen in figure 1, comma, and then talk about what you found. Or you can say what you found, and then at the end say, see figure 1 in parentheses. Or in parentheses, you can actually just put figure 1. Right, so I can say like 45% of students said they'd never heard of the food bank, and 30% said that they've heard of it but never gone to the food bank, parentheses, figure 1. And then that indicates that figure 1 shows that represented. So the three options at the beginning of the sentence, as you can see in figure 1. Option number 2, at the end of the sentence, say in parentheses, see figure 1. Or in parentheses, number 3, in parentheses, at the end of the sentence, say figure 1 in parentheses. Okay, so those are sort of the three ways, and the ones I gave you show you a couple of different ways to do that, and hopefully that will make it clear for you. Okay, and then you will have either a conclusion section and a recommendation section, or a conclusions and recommendation section. But even if you made it one section, you should talk about it in that order, right? Really, what is your conclusion and what is your recommendation? The only difference is you can do all the conclusions and all the recommendations, or you can do conclusion and recommendation related to that conclusion, recommendation related to that. But in every case, you're going to talk about the conclusion, then the recommendation. The conclusions are, why do you think people answered the way they did? What can you conclude about what you studied? Like, what do you think are the flaws? What do you think's working? So on and so forth. And then your recommendations, what do you want to do about that? Okay. And if there's anything that and I don't think I've said this explicitly, so I'm going to say it explicitly here. If there's anything that your whole report doesn't work, for example, like, it's clear in the results section that students don't like this. And then in the conclusion section, you say, this is why we think people don't like this. That needs to show up in your recommendation section, even if you're saying, we don't think we can fix this and here's why, or we don't think we should fix this and here's why, okay? So you want everything to tie together so that your reader can follow what you're trying to do. And in terms of everything fitting together, you started your report in the introduction with a question, a research question. And this should be obvious, but a lot of times students totally miss this mark. You started, what students do wrong sometimes, let's start by saying that, is that they will sometimes start with a research question, find a lot of interesting research, and then make a lot of really interesting recommendations. But the recommendations actually don't have anything to do with the original question. They've completely forgotten what the original question was. So make sure that by the end of the report, it's clear what the answer to your question was, okay? So I can't speak to everybody's question in one video, but just once you've written your recommendations and conclusions, a good thing to do would be to go back and read your introduction and see if they're kind of matching and they're building off of each other. Everything in this report goes together. You're explaining a program you want to study, how it's supposed to work, the question you have about it, all of that. Then you study it, you get results, and you make recommendations. But the recommendations have to, at least part of the recommendations have to answer the original question. Of course, you can come up with recommendations that you learned that you didn't know you were going to learn, and that's fine, but you still have to answer the original question. Okay, and just as a reminder, the last thing I'll say is remember that you can recommend additional research and you can recommend doing nothing. Okay, so, but in any case, whatever you decide, you have to kind of justify it with the data. You know, why do you think that we should do nothing? Why do you think we need to do research? Or why do you think this would be the solution to solving this problem? Use what the people told you to help back that up. Okay. And then we're going to do a peer review. You're going to get lots of feedback, and then you're going to get time to revise the report next week. It is worth a big grade. It's one of the biggest assignments you've done so far, so it's worth getting right. And I sent out a rubric which lays out exactly what I'm going to be grading for. It has a description of an A paper, and then in each of those categories, like for example, the introduction, you can get up to 10 points for your introduction. Then there's a category about images, right? You can get up to 10 points for your images, and you earn up to 100 points for 100%, okay? So look over the rubric and try your best for this peer review. Make sure you turn in a really good draft so that when you get feedback, your paper is even better than you could do your best, right? So if you do your best and then you get feedback and you make it better, then you know you got a better grade than you would have gotten. If you turn in something that you know is not good work and you get feedback that you already knew, then you're just wasting your time and your peer reviewers, okay? And that's not very professional. So do your best for the peer review, get good feedback, and make your best decisions revising, okay? And of course, let me know if you have any questions.